Good afternoon. Can I ask you to do me a favor, please? Could you take out your cell phones? No, could you now hurl them to the ground and stamp all over them? But if you don't want to do that, could you at least unplug yourself from them? Good afternoon. I am Dorian Llewellyn. I'm the Executive Director of the Ignatian Center for Jesuit Education here at Santa Clara. And welcome to the 5th annual Bannan Memorial Lecture. The lecture was founded to bring to campus each year one member of the Society of Jesus, the Jesuits, to reflect with us on contemporary, pressing, religious, social, and cultural concerns. The name Bannan is written all over Santa Clara. In 1982, members of the Bannan family, and hundreds of them have been through Santa Clara, members of the Bannan family set up a fund to honor Father Lou Bannan, who was a longtime teacher and counselor here at Santa Clara. And the fund is intended to improve the Ignatian spirit of the whole university community, to engage faculty and students from every discipline, to enhance learning, scholarship, and service. So over the years, the fund, whose home is the Ignatian Center, has contributed to help Santa Clara earn our national and international reputation as a place for rigorous inquiry that brings to bear on the burning issues of the day our Ignatian intellectual worldview. This year, the Ignatian Center took the Bannan legacy in a new direction with a project called Tech and the Human Spirit. The questions of human dignity and purpose that are emerging in the wake of new technologies are urgent. How is digital innovation changing what it means to be human, including the way we relate to each other, our bodies, our minds, our society? How can we build a technology that enables people to flourish, that enhances rather than diminishes all aspects of what it is to be a human person? And we need to ask not only what we should do with technology, but also, even before that, we need to look at who are we becoming and who do we want to become in this tech-shaped world. Santa Clara is the Jesuit university in Silicon Valley, and so we as a university are uniquely positioned to explore and answer emerging questions. No single entity can answer those questions alone. It is always done in exploration. Santa Clara prizes the education of the whole person, and one essential dimension of what it is to be a whole person is to have some sort of connection to the spiritual, whatever that looks like and whatever words we use. So today we will look at this tech-shaped world and ask, what is the role of thinking faith in a new tech-shaped world? These are big questions, and they ask not for quick, easy fixes like a software patch. What they need is long-term, wide-ranging, thoughtful, and conversation with many different partners and different perspectives, including the spiritual. Thank you for being part of this conversation. I'd like now to introduce our speaker this afternoon, Father Antonio Spadaro, who is the editor-in-chief of La Civiltà Cattolica, which is the Jesuit periodical based in Rome. Father Spadaro serves as advisor to the Pontifical Council for Culture. He also sits on the board of trustees at Georgetown University, which you might have heard of. So, his book, Cybertheology, Thinking Christianity in the Era of the Internet, addresses the impacts of the digital age on Christian life and theology. Amongst other works, he's also written Friending God, Social Media, Spirituality, and Community. And his most recent work is the edited collection, The Church in China, A New Departure, released just last month. Father Spadaro is well known as being one of Pope Francis's closest colleagues and advisors, especially on questions of the internet, social media, and digital culture. He travels frequently with Pope Francis and is one of the ways in which Pope Francis's message gets out to the world and his thinking on an important range of important topics for the Church and for the world and for the whole of humanity. Please join me now in welcoming Father Spadaro. Antonio?
Technology helps the human spirituality. There's something wrong. So we always need to fix technology for letting it be spiritual. So I'm very glad to be here. I'm very glad and also very grateful to Santa Clara University, to Father Dorian, to Aaron, to the Ignatian Center Bannan Forum for the invitation to talk to you tonight. To someone, the combination of technology and spirituality look odd, but it's not. Sometimes we think that what is technological is just artificial. We had a seminar here a couple of days ago about artificial intelligence. Well, I'm not here for talking about artificial spirituality, though. So I want to talk about technology and spirituality, and technology as a part of the human spirit. May I ask you how many of you study technology here? Okay, just a few of you. How many are studying philosophy or humanities? How many theology? All the same person. So I want to start, how many are here for the free food? So I want to start my conversation putting a question. What is internet? We talk a lot about internet, but the question is, what is it? I think it's hard to define it. Maybe internet doesn't exist at all, just because life itself is a network of relationships. I think it's necessary to debunk a myth that the web is a novelty of our times. Internet replicates older forms of the transmission of knowledge of our life. It gives shape to desires and values that are as old as the human being. We always pay attention to what is new, what is technologically advanced, but we never ask ourselves which kind of desires new technology answer to. So when we look at the internet, it's not just to see the perspectives on the future that it offers, but also the desires that human beings have always had and to which they attempt to respond, which means, which are the desires that internet answer to? Do you know? Do you have an idea? Can you make some examples? It's a real question. Why do you browse internet? For wasting time, okay, I know. But there is also some other reason, I hope. Curiosity, and?
To connect, to know, to avoid.
So knowledge, curiosity, connect, so connection, relationships. Are these desires new for the human being? They are as old as we are. So internet is old stuff. So it's, or for example, we say that internet is a network of relationships, which is true. How many of you have friends? Oh, you don't have friends. There's a person there who didn't raise his hand. So all of you have friends here. How many of you have friends who are friends with you and became friends between them because, or among them, because they are friends of yours. All of you but that guy there, of course. So this is internet. This is the reality of internet, the anthropological meaning of the net. It is true that technology often provokes astonishment and disquiet, but why are these feelings generated? It is probably because technology is able to realize something that corresponds to ancient desires and profound fears. Were this not so, then its innovations would not really touch us, intimidate us, and make us wonder. The internet is already a reality that makes up part of the everyday life of many people, of all of us. It's a space for a mankind, a human space that is populated by human beings. It's no longer something anonymous or aseptic. We put our face on Facebook, of course, so it's not anonymous. We put our face on Twitter. We put our lives, the images of our lives in Instagram. So it's no longer something anonymous and aseptic, but has a scope that is anthropologically qualified. Pope Francis wrote in his message for the World Communication Day in 2014, the internet offers immense possibilities for encounter and solidarity. This is something truly good, a gift of God. Have you ever thought about internet as a gift of God? It's interesting that Pope Francis in 2013 defined internet as a gift from God. Internet is a space for experience that is becoming an integral part of everyday life in a fluid way. Another pope, the previous pope, Benedict XVI, wrote in his own message for World Communication Day the year before, 2013, the digital environment is not a parallel or purely virtual world, but is part of the daily experience of many people, especially the young. So he abolished, in a sense, the difference between virtual and real. So internet is not a virtual environment, it's a real environment. Because when you communicate by email, messages, WhatsApp or whatever, your communication is not fake and is not virtual, but it's real. So in 2013, Pope Benedict XVI cancelled from the dictionary the word virtual, considering communication, because communication is always real. It's something anthropologically relevant. And then he added, social networks are the result of human interaction, but for their part, they also reshape the dynamics of communication, which builds relationships. So social networks, for their part, they reshape the dynamics of communication. The web is therefore not at all a simple instrument of communication. It's not a tool which one can use or not, but it has evolved into a space in what we can call a cultural environment that determines a style of thought, a way of thinking, a way to live in the world, and to organize it. It is not therefore a separate environment, but it's becoming ever more integrated, connected with the environment of everyday life. So as a result, it's not a specific place where to go, because internet now is in our pocket, is in our phone, so we have access to internet not through just computers, but also through mobile phones. So you are always there. So before starting this talk, I took a picture of you, and I didn't have time actually to post it on Facebook, but I'm going to do that. And I mean, so in a sense, my digital environment is the same environment in which I live, and I share my experience with my friends, and the friends of mine are able to share my experience with their friends, which they do usually. And this is exactly what you do. So internet is not something else, another place, something different from your life. It's your life itself. So it's not a specific place which we can enter at any time, so we can live online, and from which we can exit to re-enter life offline. Instead of making us leave our world to live into a so-called virtual world, technology has made the digital world enter our ordinary world. So it's the other way around. So technology has made the digital world enter our ordinary world. So now the internet is not a series of tubes, cables, servers, modems, devices. It's a human experience. Internet is a human experience. It's not a series of technological gadgets. Pope Francis wrote, "The digital world can be an environment rich in humanity, a network not of wires, but of people." So internet is a human experience and is made by people, not by cables and networks. I mean, Wi-Fi or whatever, devices, gadgets, and so on. So this is a big shift for understanding the meaning of this expression, tech and human spirit, because technology, internet, has to do with the spiritual life, has a specific impact on our way of living and even understanding our relationships and our world. So, for example, there's a friend of mine who lives in Seattle who knows that I'm giving this talk now, and there are many people in Italy, who are looking, who are enjoying us. I mean, this conversation, and they are join us in this conversation, even if they are in Italy. And so it's a way of sharing. Internet is made of people. This is the right understanding of the net. Now, a cornerstone of Jesuit spirituality, there are so many Jesuits here around. I never had so many Jesuits at a conference, so I'm a little bit nervous tonight. But anyway, a cornerstone of a Jesuit spirituality lies in something once said by Ignatius Loyola. Do you know who Ignatius Loyola is? Oh, really? Wow, not the Jesuit I know, of course. I mean the others. So he's the founder of the Jesuit order. And he said once, seek and find God in all things. In all things. The simple phrase explains exactly why Jesuits are not only lovers of frontiers and trenches, but also of wrong places. I was struck by the title of a book I bought in San Francisco years ago, Searching for God in All the Wrong Places. Now, I don't want you to think that we are looking for God in a wrong place, talking about internet. As a matter of fact, the digital environment is a good place to seek and find God. Technology, and above all communication technology, is not simply an illusion of control over the forces of nature in our pursuit of a happy life. To say this would be to view technology only as the result of a desire for power and domination. Benedict XVI, Pope Benedict XVI, in Caritas in Veritate, wrote, technology is a profoundly human exploit linked to the autonomy and freedom of men and women. With technology, we express and confirm the superiority of the spirit over matter. So technology, this is very important. What technology is? Technology is the organization of matter according to a conscious human design, and therefore belongs to our spiritual being. Technology belongs to our spiritual being. We are called upon to understand its very nature as it relates to spiritual life. Even social networks, when we shared our life in the social networks, that had an impact, a direct impact on our spiritual life, our ideas, our feelings, our desires. Obviously, technology remains ambivalent because human freedom can just as easily serve evil, but it is exactly the possibility that highlights how technology's very nature is intrinsically linked to a world of possibilities regarding the spirit. So the fact itself that you can do evil in internet is a proof that has a spiritual value. Obviously, technology remains so ambivalent, but it's also because of its nature that technology makes its mark on our way of understanding the world, and not just on our way of living it. So it's also our way of understanding, as I told you before. Pierre Lévy, who is an expert in cyberculture, in his book called Cyberculture, wrote, "It's impossible to separate the human being from his material environment, from the signs and images through which he or she makes sense of life and the world. The same way, one cannot separate the material world, and even less its artificial part, from the ideas through which technological objects are conceived and used by the human beings who invent them, produce them, and use them. For example, I'm here. Tomorrow, I'll be in Rome. Can you imagine? And before coming over here, I was in Morocco with Pope Francis. And probably in a week, I'll be in China. How does it possible? Because the airplane. You know, there are airplanes. There's an airport nearby, San Jose Airport, and it's very easy, especially when if Father Aaron drives you to the airport, as he's going to do tomorrow morning, I hope. But this is not just a mechanical thing, a practical thing. So the airplane has led us to understand the world in a way that is different from the way we understood it in the past. At lunch, I was talking to some Jesuits, and I remind them about Jesuit, very important Jesuit, Teilhard de Chardin, Father Teilhard de Chardin. He used to go to China by ship, and it took usually more than 1 month to go there. So his understanding of the world was different from mine. So also after the invention of the press has made us understand culture in a different way. So technology has an impact on our way of understanding our life and our world. It's not just a matter of using tools. It's a matter of understanding. So the world is different for me than it was for Father Teilhard de Chardin. A question arises spontaneously at this point. If technology, in particular the digital revolution, changes our way of thinking, then what it mean in some way that this will end by us reconsidering the faith itself and its communication. If theology is, if better to say, if internet has an impact on our thinking, and theology is thinking faith, how internet has an impact on our way of thinking faith? Because of course it has. A crucial moment in the spiritual understanding of the new technologies was the promulgation of the decree of the Second Vatican Council called Inter Mirifica. That was on December the 4th, 1963. And this decree exhorts, among the wonderful, it's interesting that the use of the adjective wonderful, among the wonderful technological discoveries which people of talent, especially in the present era, have made with God's help, the Church welcomes and promotes with special interest those which have a most direct relation to human minds and which have uncovered new avenues of communicating, most readily news, views, and teaching of every sort. So, here in 1963, a document written by bishops said that there are technologies which have a direct relation to human spirit. 1963. I was born in 1966. 1 year later, in 1964, Pope Paul VI, Saint Paul VI, he was made saint by Pope Francis, gave an audience to an automation center run by Jesuits, which was developing an electronic analysis of the Summa Theologiae by St. Thomas Aquinas and the biblical text itself. Paul VI said, "Science and technology are becoming brothers once more, not only offering us this marvel, but also providing us with a glimpse of a new mysteries." Interesting. Technology and mysteries. It is enough for us to appreciate how this very modern service is being put to the use of culture, as though this is crucial. This is the very crucial point of his speech. The mechanical brain is coming to aid of the spiritual brain. His words. The mechanical brain is coming to the aid of the spiritual brain. And the more it is able to express itself in its own language, the more it seems to enjoy being relied upon. 1964. And he continued with a question. Not this effort to infuse mechanical instruments with the semblance of spiritual functions that has made them more noble and exalted by a task that touches the sacred. This is really something. So Paul VI in 1964 is putting together technology and the secret. Say sacred? Is it right? My pronunciation is very good. So this is something real, original. This is something relevant. What does it mean? Is it the spirit a prisoner of matter, or is not the matter already tamed and forced to follow the laws of the spirit that offers that very spirit sublime devotion? This is amazing for me. I have still to understand what he means, what he meant and what it means for me now, today, what Paul VI said. The central claim posits that the mechanical brain comes to the aid of the spiritual brain. What follows is an implicit theological definition of technology, the effort to infuse mechanical instruments with the semblance of spiritual functions. is exactly what we call artificial intelligence now. So no artificial spirituality, but artificial intelligence. Paul VI heard from Homo technologicus a cry of aspiration for a higher level of spirituality. The technological person is the spiritual person. It's the same person. Technology has become a popular way for human beings to express their natural spirituality. Pope Benedict XVI, again, said in one of his messages for the World Day of Social Communication, if used wisely, new technologies can help satisfy the desire for meaning, truth, and unity, which remain the most profound aspirations of every human being. Have you ever related new technologies with your desire for meaning? I don't know, but Benedict XVI did that. The relationship between new technologies, I mean your iPhone, your Android phone, with your desire for meaning. So there is something in my pocket here that has to do with my desire for meaning, truth, and unity. That's scary. The meaning of my life into my pocket. Technological development, when applied to this manner, is able to express a longing for transcendence of the human condition as it is experienced today. The same is true of cyberspace. Cyberspace could represent the human desire for a fullness that exceeds the self, presence, relationships, and knowledge. We told that before. Cyberspace highlights our finitude, yet it also mirrors our desire for the infinite. Given the direction in which technology is moving, cyberspace seems increasingly omniscient and omnipresent, which may be what the obsession with speed is all about, theologically. So we are everywhere. And I mean, I'm here, but again, through that camera over there, and thanks to the internet, I'm everywhere. So there are people in the world that are join us for this conversation. So I am literally everywhere, potentially at least, as you are. And there is something theologically relevant here. There is a desire for communion, understanding. Have you ever posted something on Facebook in your life? No, you don't. Okay. But everyone did that. Have you ever checked after 20 seconds if someone put an I like or gave you a reaction? And if it didn't happen, what happened to you? What happens to you? You feel frustrated, isolated, alone in this world. Because you think that the others are there just for listening to you and to your life, your updates. So there is a desire here. Maybe it's wrong, maybe it's right, sometimes it's right, sometimes it's wrong, but there is a desire of communion, understanding, participation, knowledge. So to search for this fullness of presence is to operate in the field of a human, divine human experience in which spirituality and technology again intersect. How then to deal with the question of spirituality in the age of the internet? How to deal with the question of spirituality when the digital technology has become a part of the fabric of everyday life? How in the fullest manner does digital culture impact on the way we form a discourse on God and the faith? It is necessary to consider what I call cybertheology as being the intelligence of the faith in the era of the internet. That is a reflection on the thinkability of the faith in the light of the internet logic. I would like to put forth 3 important challenges. The first one, I can define it, decoding God in all the information. Decoding God in all information. In the context I described, we need to consider a possible radical change in the perception of the religious and spiritual question. Typing the word God or even religion or spirituality into a search engine produces a list of hundreds of millions of pages. The web seems to be the place for answers. Today's men and women search for God, the search of God, for men and women, the search of God begins online. How has the quest for God changed in the time of search engines? What are the implications of this research? Among the many possibilities, I will focus on one: a radical change in the perception of the religious quest itself. There was a time when human beings were firmly attracted to religion as a source of fundamental meaning. Like the needle of a compass, we knew we were oriented toward a specific, unique, and natural direction, the north. If the compass did not indicate north, it was due to the fact that the compass was not working, not because magnetic north ceased to exist. If the compass did not so indicate north, is due to the fact that the compass was not working. Then, in the aftermath of the Second World War, we began using radar. Do you know what the radar is? To detect and determine the position of fixed or moving object in space. Radar goes in search of its target and is receptive to the signals without a fixed location. Similarly, we began to go in search for the meaning of life and for a God capable of some sign of recognition, a God that could make his voice heard. The logical expression being the question, God, where are you? This question is found in the pages of great 20th century literature, not least Waiting for Godot by Samuel Beckett. The human being was portrayed as a hearer of the word. This is a famous expression of the theologian Karl Rahner, who gave theological shape to the technological metaphor of radar. Say radar, right? Radar. I learned how to pronounce it. Radar. So, hearer of the word. That is to listen for a message of which we are so profoundly in need. And what about today? Does this still hold true? Though still quite alive and true, the questions which resonated through the last century literature do not stand up today. The vision which now has more relevance is of people when their cell phones, tablets cannot gain access to a wireless connection. This is the image of our daily life. It's not the radar, but it's the fact that we always check if we got a signal. What happens if you're in a place where your phone doesn't get a signal? You feel, again, alone, isolated, not able to be reached by messages. As radar once swept the atmosphere for a signal, today we search for an access channel through which signals, data can pass. Can you see the difference between the two things? The cell phone and the radar? The dynamics is completely different. The radar was in search for a signal. Now we are waiting for receiving a signal. And we want to be always able to receive it through the push technology. So rather than simply searching for signals, we search for the ability to receive them without active participation. The ultimate consequence is a logic based on a push, not a pull system. So the push system works on the basis that when data is available, an email, for example, we receive it automatically because we keep a receiving channel open. So on updates on, I don't know, Facebook, Twitter, WhatsApp message, and so on. The pull system instead works on the basis that we can go and retrieve the data when we want to establish a connection, when we want to establish a connection. So there is an active participation in that. So the human being, whom I first compared to a compass and then to a radar, has now become a decoder. Within the push universe, we decode questions from the multiplicity of responses that reach us without any effort of our own. Messages are bombarding us. We suffer from hyper-information, a so-called information overload. So it's not important to give answers. Everyone gives answers. Even the teacher, the professor, doesn't need to give any answers because answers today are everywhere. The religious question is being transformed into a confrontation between answers that are plausible and those that are subjectively significant. So this is my first point, decoding God in all the information. So the search engines has changed our way of understanding faith and our way of searching for God. The second one, information overload and faith are as serendipity. Pope Francis is fully aware of this dynamic, even if he's 82. He has attacked the logic of information as a container and doctrine as a database. Was pretty strong on that, attacking the logic of faith understood as just a container of data, a database. At this point, I would like to recall a fact that occurred during Pope Francis' trip to the Philippines. I was there. Pope Francis was in Manila, and it was raining terribly. Before him, there were 30,000 young people on the lawn of the St. Thomas University campus. A young student, Leandro Santos, asked him a question. How do I live well at the time of information overload? A strange question to ask the Pope. How do I live well at the time of information overload? But Francis grasped the provocative question and responded, coining an image, that of a museum man, the museum man. The museum man who accumulates informations without knowing what to do with them. And then he contrasted this image with the wise man, the Homo sapiens. So the museum man and the Homo sapiens, the wise man or the wise woman, who collects data without knowing what to do with it, makes a museum of his life. This is terrible. We are in a museum, I'm sorry. I realize that, but anyway. If you close yourself up in a cocoon of the always available and on-hand information, then you close yourself to the surprise. Pope Francis said, we do not have the psychological makeup of a computer to believe that we know it all. How is this thing done? We type into a search engine a moment later the computer gives us all the answers. No surprises. If you are able to get all the answers, surprise disappears from your life. I have already said that today we are bombarded by answers. There is an answer for everything. Answers are everywhere. The predictive ability of search engines is extraordinary. You get the answer before you even ask the question today. So this is often very useful. But in this situation, what do we risk losing? The questions. We got all the answers, but we are losing the questions. If you don't know who Antonio Spadaro is, everyone knows that. But anyway, if you don't know who Antonio Spadaro is, what do? You Google me. And if you Google me, you got all the answers. And how do you Google me? Who Antonio Spadaro is? Question mark. Do you do that? Do you do that? Really? With the question mark even? Oh. This is interesting. We are losing the semantic of the question. We don't know how to put questions anymore. We put data. Antonio Spadaro, automatically Google gives us the answer. But we are not more able to put question in the right way. When you have all the answers, you stop asking questions. And if you form a vision of the world and of a research in this manner, then there's no much room left within you for surprise. If you know that every answer is always at hand, even who will be your husband or your wife, because it's possible thanks to the artificial intelligence. So if you know that every answer is always at hand, then you form a mentality which is not inclined to unpredictability. So the Pope Francis responded to Leandro this way: without serendipity, the data becomes relic-like, just a relic. Pieces from a museum. The algorithm is not enough for innovation because it's still functional within a precise system, and we want to break the system for being human beings. From this insight, Pope Francis' concept of reform, even a reform of the church, begins. Even the encounter with God is an experience of serendipity. And so Francis concludes by asking the students of the university campus to be truly Homo sapiens. Do not be afraid, he said, of surprises that shake you. You might experience a crisis, but they will help you to start your journey. For being surprised, we must be open to it. The ability of putting question is the only way to stay open, to have an open mind and an open heart. In a cultural context in which the response tends to precede the question, it is important to learn how to formulate question well, putting the question mark. The great word to rediscover, especially for us Jesuits, is discernment. We never lack radical questions, but today they are mediated by the answers that are received and that the filter recognizes. The reply is the place from which the question emerges. So it's interesting, it's the other way around. So the answer precedes the question. We must learn, deduce, and distinguish the true questions from the replies that are continually given. Even, if it's noon and you're in a place and you use, the applications like, which is the application for finding good place for eating, for example, Vise. There are many, you know. So if you use them and it's noon and you look at your phone, you usually get a message. There's a good pizza place nearby. You know? So the phone knows that it's time for eating and you are not home. So you need to find a place where to eat. So you receive the answer before you put a question, where can I find a place for eating? Or if you buy a book on Amazon, Amazon provides you all the books you need to buy, you know, because it knows you better than yourself, and so on, if you buy movies and so on. So in a cultural context in which the sensible response tend to precede a question, it's important to learn to formulate questions, and to formulate questions well, putting, again, the question mark. The next step is to get an answer before to formulate a question. This is always the next step for technology. How can our search for God and for meaning stay alive without the typical and specific syntax of the question? This is a huge question. How our search for God and for a meaning stay alive without our ability to put a question, without the typical and specific syntax of the question. And briefly, the third point. I want to complicate your life. I don't want to simplify it. I don't want to give answers. I would put questions. And I don't have all the answers to the question I am putting to you, so it's up to you. The third question is the gift in the era of the internet. So peer-to-peer or face-to-face. The web is a place of the gift. Concepts like file sharing, free software, open source, Creative Commons, user-generated content, social networks, all have within them, even if in a different way, the concept of the gift, of the abatement, or the abolishment of the idea of profit, apparently, at least. If well considered, this is free exchange. You can get it. You can get it. If you want, you can get it. This is the logic of the gift inside of the net. And you can realize a free exchange that is made possible and significant thanks to a form of reciprocity profitable for those who enter into this logic of exchange. There is the economic idea that has in its mind and the concept of the market and even a business model. Internet models a mentality of sharing that is substantially one of exchange. Which is the risk? The risk is that obscuring the perception of a deeper dynamic of which the gesture of giving is the expression. From the single subject, the receiver, the user is substituted. So all of us become users. Under this condition, the donor does not offer an object that in some way represents the relationship between him and or her and the receiver. So the difference is, there are two situations. The first is, this is a rose, this is for you. I give this flower to you. The other logic is, it's here, it's available. If you want, you can get it. Can you understand the difference of the two different logics? So we are getting used to the second one. It's free. I worked for you. If you want, you can get it. I don't care. I don't know even who you are. You can get it. There is a generosity here. It's interesting. But also, the risk is to lose the human relationship, the one-to-one, the face-to-face, the logic of the peer-to-peer is substituting the logic of face-to-face. So if we displace this logic to a theological level, we have at least one theologian here, but there are many others. We understand that the question becomes interesting. Gratia gratis data is a Latin formula, which is hard to translate into English. Do you have a good translation for it? Gratia gratis data. Because I tend to translate the grace given for free. I don't know, for free. Okay, but anyway, this could be a translation, a grace given, free giving. Freely giving. This is much better, freely giving. So this kind of a grace, as it is theologically understood, means instead that one does not take the grace, but receives. And one always enters into a relationship beyond which we have no understanding. So the grace of God is not a freebie. This is what I mean. You cannot take it, you receive it. At the same time, grace is communicated through incarnate mediation and is spread in a logic that is compatible with that of peer-to-peer, but is not reducible to it. So the logic of grace, and even the simple grace of our simple life, the grace we share in our relationships. So the logic of grace creates ties, face-to-face, as is typical of the logic of the gift of communicating faces, a thing that is instead extraneous per se of the peer-to-peer logic, which is a logic of connections and exchange, of communicating vessels, not of communion, what we called theologically communion. A face is never reducible to a simple node. Grace is not reducible to a logic of connections, which can be very anonymous and on an individual and impersonal basis. Allow me 2 more minutes, 2, no more, for a fourth. This is serendipity, now unpredictability of my speech, and then I will finish. A fourth challenge, which is very relevant today, interiority versus interactivity. A very important question which is arising in these times and which requires a real discernment is about interiority at the time of interactivity. Spiritual life today is affected by a world in which people are discovering and living the dynamics of the web, which are both interactive and immersive. You know, there was a child, and that happened even to me, was just browsing a newspaper. So at some point, he saw a picture and started to tap on it. It happened to me with Corriere della Sera, which is the main Italian newspaper. It doesn't work. Because if you don't have an interaction, it doesn't work. So generally, interiority for us is synonymous with another word which is hard to pronounce for me. Depth is fine. No, depth. So going down. Yeah? Yeah. So generally, interiority is synonymous with depth. And interactivity is often synonymous with superficiality. Are we condemned to superficiality? Is it possible to bring together depth and interactivity? This presents another great challenge for me. In the web, there are no depth to explore, just nodes to browse and connect to one another. what seems superficial is only the way in which we move, perhaps unplanned and foreseen, from one node to another. The spirituality of today's person is very sensitive to these experiences in general. So probably connecting the dots, it's our way today for growing in depth. So for living maybe a different kind of spirituality. So what will the ability of thinking be like of those people whose mode of thinking is undergoing mutation because they live in a digital environment? And of course, how the cyber thinking, which is a fully interactive way of thinking, is going to change our way of thinking theology, especially for the digital native theologians. The Christian tradition teaches us how to be contemplative in action by combining interaction and contemplation. But this is a challenge. It's not easy to understand what it means. So as we see, the new technologies profoundly change the very concept of having an experience, and even a spiritual experience. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Father Spadaro. I'm going to like to do a little classroom exercise, which is for, could you speak to the person next to you for a period of 2 minutes? That's a face-to-face conversation. I'd like to think, what one thing or one question do you have as a result of this? So, let's start speaking.
Questions? Questions?
Would you like some water?
I don't.
Yeah. This is great. This is good. You gave me a lot to think about. It's good. But this is good. It's good for the students to hear this. It's really excellent. Yeah. Now that we've primed the pump, we'd be happy to take questions, and I suggest questions, and we have one microphone there and one microphone here. Thank you. Can we actually, do you know, John, I'm going to censor you because I'd like a student to ask the question first. Yeah. There. Is that no, I'm not going to embarrass them. These are not my students. So maybe we'll make you an honorary student, John. Okay, thank you.
Hi, I'm John Massey. Recently, I switched from an Android phone to an iPhone. Huge mistake. And there I was without access to information. I experienced what is AHAS, Apple High Anxiety Syndrome. Until I got back to it, I felt lost. I couldn't access information, but that got worked out. And I've often said I've prayed more at the computer screen, thinking I would blow something up, than at the altar. And my question is, when you were talking about the technological brain, being brother with the spiritual brain. My challenge is having a background in the spiritual brain of really accessing and understanding, because it really is a different language for me, the technological brain. And I don't know what it is for a generation of nuns, that is, those who have no particular faith or even a faith question, but who are technological savvy in encountering a spiritual brain and even recognize it in terms of these human, very basic desires that are being communicated through the internet.
Thank you.
Thank you. Well, this is more than a question. This is a consideration, and I think you're right. This is a big challenge, and the challenge for me is not how to use well the technological devices, but how they have an impact on our way of thinking, our life, so it's not a matter how to use an Android device or an iPhone. It's a matter how the iPhone or the Android device or whatever have an impact on my way of living my life and my life of prayer, for example, as you told you before. It's not a problem of, it's not just a problem of having something popping up in your computer or device when you pray. This could be a problem, it could be very easily solved. But for example, there is an application for praying the office, which allows you to see in form of dots those who are praying the same prayer using the same app around the world, which is fascinating. You have a feeling of communion you never had before. I mean, you have a visual experience of the communion. So you know, when I pray, I know that I'm in communion with you, even if I'm in Rome. It's fine. But when I see you popping up as a dot in my app, I feel there is a community praying all around the world. All of these are challenges, but it's nothing new here. So when you speak about the nuns, not the nuns, right? The nuns, not the sisters. Yes, I'm just kidding. It's the same thing. I mean, the desire for God, at least in the theological understanding, is present in every one of us, even if we don't give the name. So our challenge is to help the people to put the right question in order to give a name of the experience they do. This is why it's fascinating how to find God in all wrong places, because there aren't wrong places for God. This is what Pope Francis is repeating almost every day. So God is at work, is working you, is at work in you in different ways. The point is that you can be aware or not. And it was easier for us to be aware, considering the spirituality we lived in the centuries, no? The past, I mean, the big spirituality and so on. But now the technology has a deeper impact on our way of thinking and living. So the question is how to discover the spiritual dynamics and the spiritual dynamic in our life at the time when we use technology. But the question is not new, it's old, and it's very fascinating. But it means also, it implies at least ability of a different way of thinking, even recognizing new forms of spirituality.
Thank you. I think we have a question in the back.
Hi, thank you for being here. Aristotle Douglas. I had a quick question for you. So it seems like this most recent Pope is very conscious of the benefits and the pros and the cons of technology. And I was wondering if you and the Pope are in talks or conversation with any media companies or any, technology companies, just to, in any way.
Yeah, the answer is very simple. So the CIO of Apple, so Tim Cook and Zuckerberg, all of them met the Pope, met Pope Francis. And Pope Francis is an 82 years old guy. He said that he considers himself as a dinosaur. He said that explicitly. But I realized that it's very easy for him to speak to a camera, to have a chat on a computer. He did that at least 4 or 5 times with young children around the world, just seated in front of a computer and using, I don't know exactly which system, I don't remember now, maybe Google, but for chatting. So it's very easy, it's very natural. I don't know why, probably because he has a huge pastoral experience, so it's easy for him to adjust himself to different way of communicating. And he had talks, of course, with people who are in charge of technology or people who got a very higher position, because he's aware of the importance of communication. So yes, the answer is yes.
More questions? Yes, there's here.
Thank you. Hi, I'm Caitlin. I just had a quick question. I was wondering what you thought about different churches on social media and how they have like Instagram accounts and post different, prayer sources and things like that. I was wondering what your opinion was on that.
You mean churches in general? I mean, or Catholic Church or churches?
Just churches in general
churches
and like
general.
their outreach
That's
that way.
interesting because there is also a digital ecumenism. No? I take advantage of this question because for me it's very important to be on, to browse internet, to enjoy the social networks, because this helps me to know better the others. So other way of understanding Christianity, other ways of praying, traditions, theologies, and this is easier today, much more than before. And churches are using a lot. Even the Pope himself, he has a Twitter account, a lot of followers. Me, myself, Antonio Spadaro, follow me. So a lot of followers and so on. I'm enjoying them. And I put questions. I like to put questions. I give messages. And so this is the way. But the best way for me to be present in the digital environment is just sharing life. So not posting verses taken by the gospel, for example, as another word hard for me to pronounce. Advertisement?
Advertisement.
Advertisement. I'm learning a lot tonight. Advertisement. No, this is not the right logic. The logic is to share your Christian life, your day-by-day life on the social network. This is the way even for better evangelizing, for spreading the gospel. The other way could be ideological. For example, another good way for me is putting questions. Since we are losing questions, the best way for evangelizing is not just communicating a message, but putting the right questions to people, letting them to answer.
Do we have another question? Yes, we have one here.
Hi, I'm Junha. So I believe earlier in your speech you mentioned that the internet was a gift from God, but interestingly enough, because communication is so easy, a lot of us tend to ignore people's messages to avoid sending read receipts and stuff. Do you also believe that this was God's plan or a gift from do you believe this was also a part of God's plan, is my question.
It's a very good question. I need to give a talk about this topic. This is not just a topic for a quick answer, but I'll try to be extremely brief. That was just a quotation by Pope Francis. He said that internet is a gift of God. What it means, that he sees the plan of God on humanity. So, and if you look the story of humanity, it's a history that implies convergence. So there is a plan for unity, and the plan of God is to unite the human being. And internet is a great tool, if in a sense, for that. So internet enables people to get together. Of course, I mean, there is the good and the bad, but at the same time, it's a way in which humanity can unite itself, and a lot of good things are going there. So in this sense, it's a gift. Of course, you can ignore messages because you receive a lot of messages, but it's not just about technology, it's about you and how you deal with technology. For example, someone says, you know, if Facebook friends, they are fake, they're fake, they're not real friends. The real friendship, it's something different. But if we say this, we create, we push a kind of a schizophrenia.
Schizophrenia. Schizophrenia.
Schizophrenia. Because, I mean, we live on Facebook. So what we do is always real. A question for you. Do you ever smile to a person you really hate? It's like, good morning. Did you live hypocritical?
Hypocritical.
Hypocritical attitude in your life? Are you sometimes hypocritical with other people, smiling at them even if you don't like them? You're smiling, which is true. Can you understand can you get the meaning of the question? Yes, of course. So even your face-to-face relationships can be hypocritical. So it's not a matter to be online or offline. It's a matter, it's a question of your life and your attitude to be honest. So internet itself, it's a gift of God, but the gift has to be used, and it's up to you to use well this gift.
Father Spadaro, we've heard a lot about gifts this afternoon, so thank you for sharing the gift of your wisdom with us this afternoon, and thank you very much.
Thank you for your passion.
So talking about free gifts, there's the free gifts, there's some food, and there's some wine there. Please do help yourself and linger and stay in chat. One more announcement. Sorry, bear with me. 1 minute.
Sorry. Actually, a good question to transition to our next event, which is April 25th, which is Technology's Invisible Hand, Divine Providence, and the Techno-Scientific Myth of Progress. So we'll talk more about these issues then in the St. Clair room.
Thank you so much, and we'll get that. And please, evaluations, please do post them there, but please go and help yourself to the snacks and to the drinks.
And thank you for teaching me how to pronounce words.
Okay, thank you. Antonio.